Do you want me to look any particular place?
Just, yeah, the camera's fine.
Okay.
Okay, first question.
You're on the camera.
Sorry?
Can I look at you?
Yeah, you can look at me. Wherever you want to look's fine. First question is, why are you personally here? And what do you think the Occupy movement is about?
I'm here because I, in general, support the intentions of the people that are here. And I think, in essence, what the Occupy movement is about, from what I can observe, is that what's really driving it is that people see that there is a lot of injustice in the world, a lot of selfishness, a lot of suffering, and a small minority of people are willing to do what has been happening for thousands of years, which is to use a temporary advantage that they have to enslave other people. You know, slavery was only about 200 years ago, if you think about it, and it's not that far off from us. And if you look at places, you know, some situations in China and other countries like that, you can see that. And I think, you know, I wouldn't say it's inherent in human nature, but it's an inherent possibility of human nature for people to use an advantage that they have, a temporary advantage, to take advantage of other people and exploit them and not respect their innate dignity. And I think the people here, whilst they might not necessarily have formed a very firm demand, they are all here because they see the injustice and the suffering and the selfishness.
Okay, next question. Describe your political philosophy.
I wouldn't say I have a political philosophy. My approach is that, if anything, the closest thing I would have to a political philosophy is the power of knowledge and the importance of really trying to understand an issue. You know, unfortunately, we don't have all the time in the world, so it's not easy to understand many issues in reality. But I do think that it's very important for people to, I think knowledge is power, and I think the world is a lot more complicated than people make it out to be. You know, every issue has more than two sides. It's like a diamond, has many facets. And if I had one sort of thing that's close to a political philosophy, it would be the need for people to truly understand something before they take action on it, and to understand the context and the depth and the nuances. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in the world, and one of the biggest problems of the media, is that people need to understand things a little bit better before they go off and start, you know, shouting or killing.
Next question. What are your top 3 demands, and to who?
I don't have any specific demands for anybody, but I think that what would be useful for people would be, in general, and I'd say this is for everybody, is to really try to understand things before you start, you know, attacking people or blaming people, or, you know, to really try to understand the multifaceted nature of things. And I think it's very not very helpful for people to be selfish. We live in a world where we are all related. You know, it's been a recent cliche that people talk about, you know, everything's interdependent. Well, you know, Buddhism, for example, teaches that everything has always been interdependent. You know, everything is related to everything else and depends on everything else. We all depend on each other. And selfishness is, not being selfish is not just something you do out of being nice, and it's a good thing to do. We all rely on each other, whether you like it or not. And if one person is affected, everyone else is affected. You know, it might not be obvious straight away, but in fact that's the way it is. And a simple example is that if you let a disease run rampant in one country, eventually that disease will spread to other countries. That's just one simple example. You know, you can't pollute one part of a lake without it coming off to the other side of the lake, so to speak. You know, so this is, if you take that analogy and understand that all of the world is like that, even, you know, the world of thoughts, you know, the world of memes and concepts is the same. You know, it all spreads throughout the whole system. So people need to acknowledge that. And selfishness is just ignoring a basic physical, you know, almost like a physics of reality. It's just dumb.
Okay. Next question is, how would you implement those demands? So you didn't really have demands, but you seem to focus on information and education. So how would you implement that?
Well, in my own personal life, I started a website called fullyinformed.net, which was and maybe in the future could again be because it was only a nascent sort of thing that was just begun, and then there was a world economic crisis. But it was designed to be a sort of replacement for the mainstream media as a way of drawing energy to a different way of doing journalism, for example, whereby you explain the issues in depth in as an objective way as possible and make it as interesting as possible as well. Almost like an encyclopedia of the issues, such that people can get real understanding of the issues rather than just sort of going off on left wing, right wing, in very simplified views. So I think that's one thing I personally have done. I also pass on any sort of spiritual knowledge that I've gained in my life and try to share that as much as possible. I wouldn't really call them demands. I think you can't make a demand in life in some ways, in that to make a demand is to assume that there's some greater power than yourself that you're supplicating to. We are all connected and we're all part of the systems, or the greater planet and so forth. So to make a demand like that is sort of a bit philosophically bogus almost. We're all in it together, and we have to cooperate, or we're going to have more problems.
Last question, is there anything else you want to add?
I think it's important for people who are not at the protests and so forth, or who may sit back and watch on TV and be critical and say, look at those hippies, or look at those activists and those ferals and so forth, to realise, I can't remember the exact quote, but there's that famous quote about, first they came to take the poets and I did nothing, then they came to take, you may know that, people should look that up if they don't know it. People should not think that they're immune to the problems.
Do you know the
world.
historical context of that quote if you don't remember the quote itself?
I think, was it to do with the situation in Germany in the 1939 or something like that? I don't know exactly where it came from, but the bottom line is that you can't assume that you're immune. I mean, look what happened down in New Orleans. A very rich country, and people were starving and raping each other in the middle of the big what do you call it, the stadium there. People assume that they're immune. People, I'm sure that in Japan, people didn't have any idea that there'd be a nuclear explosion. People make a massive mistake if they think that they're immune from the world's problems. If you're not doing something about it, then you are asking for a situation whereby you may end up being affected in quite a bad way. And I guess a lot of people around the world are discovering that right now with the poverty resulting from the world economic crisis. So we're not immune, people. We have to work together.
That's it.